r/NoSleep, posted by Reddit user YungSeti. My final call as a police dispatcher has scarred me. I had worked as a police dispatcher for 9 years of my life. It's a career that takes a level of mental fortitude that I don't think many possess. I used to hate saying stuff like that. I always thought it was so pretentious. But the truth is, it takes a special type of person to be willing to voluntarily listen to some of the things that we have to listen to every single day. And don't get me wrong, the job wasn't always grim. It even had its decent moments. I've got enough decently funny drunk 911 call stories to last me several lifetimes. Though, the reality of the job was usually far darker. I understood that though, and felt that I was more than equipped to deal with anything that job could throw at me. I was right for a while. And for years I had answered every call, always able to keep a steady head despite being faced with some of the most horrific situations. My confidence in my ability to handle my job unwavering, until the final call I ever took as a police dispatcher. I glanced at the time display at the corner of my computer screen. 11:43. I yawned, leaning backwards in my chair, with arms extended as I stretched back. I'd been at the desk since 3 in the afternoon, answering calls and dispatching officers as they were needed, which wasn't very often in this town. I lived in a little port town in Washington, about an hour or so out of Seattle, and though we weren't without our fair share of crime, our phones never rang off the hook, which meant a lot of free time for me. I was always okay with that, as soul-wrenching as many of the calls could be. Moments of respite were always more than welcome. A notification on my screen caught my attention. In an instant, I had returned to my seat, headset on. 911, what's your emergency? I spoke into my headset, as automatically as my line repeated hundreds of thousands of times can be spoken. For a moment, the line was only dead silent before I heard a reply. I need a policeman. I think somebody's in my house. A child whispered from the other line. I felt the smallest knot beginning to form in my stomach. I shifted in my seat. Okay, do you know your address? I asked, adopting a firm but lighter tone in response to the caller's age. I heard shuffling and heavy breathing from the other line, followed by a faint, "Wait." The caller returned and whispered their address. She was a little girl by the sound of her voice, and she sounded scared. "Good job. What about your phone number?" The process repeated, and I quickly relayed her information to dispatched officers. Her address was on the edge of town, maybe a little out of the way, and I understood that it might be a while before help arrived. I stifled a sigh, not wanting to vocalize my worry, as I received an estimated arrival time. "Is there an adult in your house?" I continued. "No," the little girl replied breathlessly. I could hear anxiety rising in her voice as she spoke. "My mom works late, and my sister and I..." There was a pause, followed by an audible sniffle. "She's camping with her friends and..." Somewhere on the end of the line, there was a crash, and then a scream. My heart dropped. "Are you still there? Are you alright?" There was a repetitive thumping sound, followed by the slam of a door. "I'm here," the little girl spoke breathlessly into the phone. "Are you alright?" I repeated the question. "Yes," was all she replied, barely above a whisper. Her tone worried me. She sounded more than afraid. Maybe sad? No, disturbed was the proper word for it. And then she began to cry. Not as quiet as you would expect given her situation, but a deep, helpless sob that made my heart sink. When she spoke, it stopped altogether. "Please, please help me, please." Her sob turned into hysteric cries, and I could hear loud, repetitive thumps from her end. Footsteps, and they were clearly not hers. They were heavy, far too heavy for a little girl. Without warning, a shrill cry like the sound of a microphone feedback rang through my headset. The sudden assault on my ears caused me to jump, and my heart to set off racing like a jackrabbit. I fought the instinct to throw off the headset, and instead clenched my eyes shut as the noise faded as suddenly as it had come.
"I saw it,"
she sputtered through sobs.
"Oh, please, please, I don't know what it is."
The frantic and frenzied nature of her begging increased, and a strangeness began to settle in the air that I couldn't quite place. A quick glance around the room confirmed that most of the desks around me were empty, and I was on the call alone. The thought made me feel very isolated, and a growing unease continued to take hold of me that I couldn't place. Something about the call just felt wrong. "Police are on their way," I began. I tried to infuse the statement with my usual level of assertiveness and confidence, but I worried that the uneasiness may have been audible in my voice. "Can you tell me your name?" I asked.
"Amber."
"All right, Amber. Are you or can you get somewhere safe? A room with a door you can lock?"
"I'm in my room,"
she said through sniffles, as it was obvious that she'd been crying profusely.
I locked the door."
Good. I'm gonna stay with you on the line. Is there anywhere you can hide?" The sound of footsteps grew in the background as her voice lowered to a whisper.
"I think under the bed,"
she whimpered. "Okay. Is there..." I paused, thinking over my words before continuing. "Anything you can use to protect yourself?" There was a silence on her end for the moment, followed by a hushed yes as she dropped the phone, I assumed to get a weapon. The clamor from within the house had grown closer to the phone, and the piercing ringing had returned. I was almost certain there had to be something wrong with my headset or Amber's phone, and the sound grew to an almost unbearable extent, matched only by defeating thuds from somewhere on the phone. It sounded too close. I could feel the hairs beginning to rise on the back of my neck, and the ominous sense of panic began to give way to an unexplained fear. The urge to look over my shoulder grew harder to fight as the persistent thudding grew louder, nearer. It all sounded too clear, I guess. There was no static, none of the white noise of a typical phone call. Nothing. Just the sound of footsteps approaching closer, closer. I gave in to my instinct, whipping around in my seat, nearly losing my headset. No one. I had no time to settle my nerves as Amber returned to the line.
Are you there?"
she whispered, yanking me from my fog and back into the moment. Yes, I replied. I struggled to shake off my fears. Something was very wrong with the situation. Despite my worries, I shifted my attention back to Amber.
There isn't any weapon,"
the girl muttered.
"But I have something."
There was a pause. Okay. What do you have?" I asked, realizing my prompt was necessary.
A rabbit. A pink rabbit,"
she said, and even over the phone, I could hear a little embarrassment.
"My dad gave it to me when I was little,"
she sniffled.
He said it would keep me safe."
I didn't know what to say for the moment, but didn't want to miss a beat. And he was right, I said, as encouragingly as I could. "Everyone knows pink bunnies are great protection. Can you go back under the..." I was interrupted. "Amber, I miss you." I could hear a man calling from within the house. So the intruder knew her? I furrowed my brow. "Amber, do you recognize that voice?" I asked, hoping she could identify the intruder. There was silence for a moment before her response.
It sounds like my dad." Why does it sound like my dad?
I blinked. What do you mean?
That's my daddy's voice. Why does it have my daddy's voice?
I didn't know how to respond to that. Hell, I didn't know what to think about. Had his voice. Before I could ask what she meant, we were interrupted by a sound. The thing we heard has taken me years to try to understand. I've come to believe it was that thing's laugh. At the time, though, we couldn't know. It was the sound of metal crunching in a car accident as it met flesh. A wet, grinding shriek that shook me to my core. I wanted to vomit. My vision began to blur. I can only imagine what it was like for Amber, hearing all that in person.
Amber,
I panted, my senses returning to me at once. She barely had time to respond before we heard it. A voice or voices calling for her somewhere nearby. They spoke as one with some odd, inhumane nature, dripping with malintent.
Amber.
My blood froze. Amber began to cry, and her cries eventually became pleas as she begged for her help, her life, her mother, and my intervention.
5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes,
I muttered, mentally cursing at the timer which displayed the estimated time arrival of the dispatched officers. I prayed it would be soon enough.
It's outside the room,
she whispered, her voice in utter panic before breaking into a quiet sob. I silently swore under my breath.
Amber, I need you to hide right now if possible. The police are 3 minutes away. Stay as quiet as possible.
There was no response, but from the shuffling sounds I could hear that she had gone back under the bed. For a few moments there was silence. Then Amber spoke, and my heart dropped.
I'm going to die.
You are not going to die, Amber, I began, worry now audible in my voice.
I promise. It's reaching under the door. Oh my God,
she muttered. There was a crash louder than before, and Amber began to shriek. The noises continued, and it began to dawn on me what I was hearing. It was breaking down the bedroom door. Amber's screams had devoured into horrible babbling and pleas for her life to whatever was on the other side of that door. Her screams were soon drowned out by the same noise as before. That sick, fucking laughter.
What are you?
Amber shrieked, loud enough to make my ears ring.
Please, what are you?
What are you?
It mocked in a voice that was some sort of sick parody of Amber's. Panic gripped me as I glanced back at the corner of the monitor displaying the dispatched unit's arrival time. 1 minute 36 seconds. Please God, let it be soon enough. Amber, are you there? I called. Amber. As suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. Somewhere in the distance, I hear sirens.
I hear them, Amber. Officers are a minute away.
Silence. My heart began to sink. Amber, are you there? I could hear some shifting, breathing.
I think it's gone,
Amber said. A surge of relief rolled through me, and I let out a sigh and leaned back in my chair. 27 seconds, the dispatch time read, and the sirens in the background grew louder. You did very well, Amber. Police are almost there. You did really well. I couldn't think of anything else to say. I'd never had a call like this, and something about it felt so strange. Something Amber had said began to ring in my mind. What are you? Amber, I began. What did you see? I was met with silence. Amber began to laugh. Amber, I said, voice pleading, a wave of realization crashing down on me. The laughter grew more raucous and less human with every second. Somewhere in the background, there was a knocking sound. They'd finally arrived. Too late. I asked the only thing I could think in that moment. Why? The laughter stopped abruptly as the thing on the phone spoke.
It was fun.
The house was empty when the officers arrived. No signs of forced entry anywhere except the door to Amber's bedroom, the bottom of which had been torn away by something, leaving a wide space to crawl beneath. And Amber, or what was left of her, decorated the room. Whatever had been there left nothing behind to identify it, only carnage. The case was never officially closed, and everyone had their theories as to what happened that day, ranging from serial killers to bear attacks and everything in between. The call was never made public, not my decision, but not one I necessarily complained about either. I never want to hear that recording again. I put in my 2 weeks notice that same night, though I never returned to work after that day. I'd been content to try to forget about that call. As callous as it may sound, I was content trying to forget about Amber, to forget whatever I had spoken to on that phone. But I don't think it's done with me. Last night I dreamed of, or had the thought that I was dreaming, of sounds of footsteps running throughout my house, as something screeched and laughed and mocked me just outside my bedroom door. I stayed in my bed long into the morning, despite the sounds having stopped, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and confusion, until eventually I convinced myself to leave bed. I crossed the room, cursing at every creak the floor made under my weight. I lowered myself to the ground, holding my breath as I peered under the bedroom door. There was something there, but it wasn't moving. I mustered up the little bravery I had left and rose to my feet, my eyes shut tight, and a prayer on my lips. I pulled out my bedroom door, slightly, and stuck my head out just enough to see what lay outside. I stifled a gasp and tears flooded my eyes as I bent over to pick up the object. Placed right outside my door was a little pink bunny, covered in dark stains. From somewhere within the darkness, just beyond the bedroom door, Amber's laugh echoed.